Welcome. So I'm here with my lovely friend Julie again, and I'm always so excited to talk to her. She's amazing, and I've actually
As are
seen.
you.
Thank you. I've seen her on some podcasts lately. So if you look her up, I'm sure you could see her story and learn more about her. I think that everybody would benefit from those. I've been watching them, and they've been encouraging for me. So if you want to do
Oh,
that.
that's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. So we were just having a discussion before we decided to jump on here and share this with all of you about our energy and frequency and vibration and emotions and darkness and light and all the fun stuff about awakening. And so we're going to include you guys in on a conversation with us and see what happens. We honestly don't even have any idea what we're going to be talking about other than we know it's going to be about some of that stuff. Maybe we'll see. But
Well,
yeah,
and you were sharing something that came through when you were doing a channeling session this week, and I'm excited to hear about it. So,
yes, this was so I do a monthly live channeling where a spirit team that I've been working with for a couple years named the Wisdom Keepers. That's what they told me they are. They hold wisdom of the universe, basically. Like they have like the inner knowing of how energy works. And during this live channeling, one of the people on there asked about those of us that come to Earth, and we're kind of different. We're the one in the family that kind of sticks out, and we're what we would call the black sheep. And how a lot of us that are the black sheep are the ones that are the healers or the awakened ones or that one that leave behind old beliefs and kind of challenge the system a little bit. And when the question came through, I loved the response of the wisdom keepers because they said, it isn't it interesting that you call this individual the black sheep because you have an idea of the black sheep being a negative part or like that it's dark in some way. But when you come outside of the belief that there's light and darkness, you can see that in the color of what you consider black, that all frequencies exist within it. And it's actually a combination of the entire rainbow of colors combined together. And that's why it shows itself so densely. And so, what you could consider the black sheep or the one that stands out in the family is the one that has the most energy connection to something outside of themselves, a higher consciousness, and they're usually the ones that take on the challenge of like releasing karmic cycles or healing, like they heal themselves, which then allows the healing to expand outward to maybe family members or loved ones or even people they don't even know. And so they kind of use that as an example of like what you we might see as negative is actually a positive from their point of view, because in order to be the one that brings a new vibration to something, you have to be a different vibration than what everything is around you. And that's what transforms the energy, is by being separate and being considered the different one. But I loved how they explained that, the language that we came up with as the black sheep, they're like, oh, well, if you saw it from our point of view, we would see all the vibrant colors that are so intertwined, it appears that way, but it's not really what it is. It's all the
wow.
light combined. And
Wow.
so, which I think is really cool because right before we got on here, we were talking about for us humans, linear line of light, or how we have darkness and light. And I liked your description about how I can't remember what you said. What did you say about
About
that?
the two rooms,
Yeah,
is that the
yeah.
one? Okay. Yeah, because if we think about light and we tend to I was just reading more of Dr. David Hawkins. I think it was in his book because I read a couple books this week, but where he was talking about that we tend to think of it in duality, like darkness or light, but really it's a scale of light because darkness is just the absence of light. And really in your explanation, I was thinking how different it is. Like darkness is different than the color black, which is hard for us to wrap our head around because even when you were talking about that, on a little bit of a tangent here, but when you were talking about that, I was thinking about black holes, where that those are energy vortexes that just they're so powerful. I don't really understand them.
I was told a few years ago, which I haven't shared this with anybody. It came through when I was channeling I think my second book. Um but suddenly I just started getting this message about the black hole of the universe. And obviously the wisdom keepers know about this and I don't. So I'm like, where did this come from? But they explained to me that the energy of the black hole is where they transform, like it's almost like a recycling been for the universe. Like they take the karmic dark energy that we create or other beings or whatever around and they recycle it back into light. And so the black hole is like allowing the
All that
universe to
energy.
continue to expand by release, just like we have to release karmic energy and trauma. So does the entire universe. Everything is a mirror of itself. So we are a mirror of the universe. Our cells are a mirror of the universe. The earth is a mirror of the universe. And it's continually letting go of what isn't serving it to expand itself. And so they explained to me the black hole is where that energy goes
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
released, which is
Uh,
crazy.
that's awesome. So what I was talking about before when we were talking about like the spectrum of light, darkness is the absence of light. It's not an entity in and of itself. So if you have two rooms and one room has light in it and the other room, just using a visual perspective on the idea of light, one room has light in it, the other room doesn't have light in it. If you open the door between those two rooms, what happens? It's not that the darkness from the one room enters the room that's light, it's the light infuses into the room that was previously without light. So we see the power of light. And what I was sharing too was this idea like from Dr. David Hawkins. He has you can Google this and find it, the map of consciousness, but it's essentially it's a visual. I love it because it's a visual of the levels of consciousness of humanity. So at the bottom, we have shame and guilt and fear and all those emotions that we think of as, they're contracted emotions. And at the top of the scale, we have love and light and peace. Not light necessarily. That's not actually, I don't think, written on there, but, love and peace and enlightenment, in fact, at the top of the scale. So as I was reading more about this, because maybe you've heard, I know you've heard this, Angie, maybe others have heard this idea that one person who is carrying more light, just like the room where you open the door and the light expands into the room that didn't have light, one person who is living at a higher frequency of light can affect a lot of people. And I don't even remember what the numbers are, but the numbers are astronomical. I mean, I think it's something like one person with this increased higher vibration of light can impact a population of 10,000 or some number like that, which I don't understand that because it's at a level of frequency that I don't quite understand. But when I think about that door opening between the room with light and the room that was absent of light and see how that light, the exposure to light lightens the what we call darkness, it starts to make a little more sense. So everything that we do as individuals without doing anything. So everything that we do to be in a higher frequency, to add light to our being, influences not only ourselves, like you said, but all the people around us. And I think it influences more than we realize because the sun shines on the earth and it shines on everybody.
Right. Right.
And the sun's not doing anything, it's just being.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's so true. And as you were talking, I was having these visions go through my head of the different, like on that scale of emotions, the different frequencies, and how all of us have felt every one of them. I have been in shame. I have been in guilt. I've been in fear. I've been in grief. I've felt it all. So they're all a part of who I am. Those emotions have been a part of the experience of my existence. And they don't necessarily go away because, like, as you know, when you lose somebody, the grief of that doesn't leave, it just transforms, it becomes less, it becomes not as controlling of your emotions. And that's because you're be able to shift out of that frequency into a little bit more light, just like the analogy you use of opening the door from one room to another. The darkness in that room didn't go away. It didn't disappear. You can turn the light back off and it's right back there where it started. And so that's why for us, by being our authentic self, by it being in meditation, by connecting with our true highest self and raising our vibration and allowing ourselves to experience the emotions that we have in our body, to go through the grief, to, heal the shame, heal the fear, all the things that we all have in our body. There's not a human that hasn't had that. Jesus had that. Buddha had it. We all have human emotions, but allowing them to entrap us and keep us in the dark is where we keep our vibration low, and then we stay in that dark room. And then what we do is we blame the darkness for making us feel bad, when really we have the ability to open the door and let the light in. And so when you're able to let the light in, we have a choice of whether we allow that to transform that darkness and become our embodiment and being, or to move back into the lower vibration and become a victim of it. And so, as we are shifting into higher consciousness as humans, like for you, me, all of us that are awakening to more of the higher version of who we are, we have moved through these emotions. I don't know anybody that has gone through an awakening that hasn't had to deal with that emotion first before they became to the peace or the place where they feel now. Like, we've all gone through a deep pain to get to where we are. There's not really any other way around it. I think that Jesus even had to go through that. And so, but like, even as his light is an example, it's still spreading 2000 plus years later. That still energy is still transforming lives, whether we want to deny or not. But we don't realize how powerful we are as well, that we have that same frequency within us. And as we continue to open the door more and more into that dark room that of our human experience, our vibration shifts, and we have a choice on how we carry that into the world. If we walk into a room where our old patterns exist, maybe a family or a place that, we were hurt or something happened where those emotions first began, or they're triggered back into it, we have a choice in that to work with that energy to allow it to teach us or to become a victim of it. And that's how we keep rising our vibration, is by those things being exposed by the light more and more and more. And if you can imagine that light expanding each time you release more and more energy, and allow yourself to see those things that are still existent in those dark parts of you, that vibration expands, and you have to impact the life around you. You have to impact the energy around you. The people around you, if they want to stay around you, will be impacted by it, because you can't be at a high vibration and a low vibration at the same time. And that's why people often lose relationships when they start to heal and grow and rise in their consciousness, because everybody has to rise with that. When there's light, you can't overcome it with darkness, because the light always overcomes the lower frequencies.
Mm, yeah. Well, one of the things I thought of when you were talking about that is the victim mentality that's so prevalent. Like we all fall into it. Um, but when we can look at when we feel that moment of feeling the victim, it's recognizing it, it's acknowledging it, and then it's uh, not even transforming it, but it's transmitting it, or transmuting it. It's like transcending is the word I'm looking for. And so how, for example, I'll give you an example. So right now, as when we're doing this recording, we're in astrologically what we would call Mercury retrograde. It's not that Mercury is moving backwards, but from our viewpoint on Earth, it is moving in a backward path from our viewpoint. Mars is also in retrograde right now. What is really interesting about retrograde is a lot of people, even if you're not familiar with astrology, this will make some sense, I promise. But a lot of people look at retrogrades as really challenging times and difficulties, and to be afraid of this or that or the other, of a project or a relationship or a communication or what. Especially Mercury is all about communication. Mars is all about passion and our the passion that we bring into our life, and where our passion is, and so when it's retrograde, we feel the universe is giving us a different energy. But if we come to it from the standpoint of everything is for my good, everything is for my growth. As I look at retrograde now, what I see is that retrograde periods are periods of time where we have an opportunity to slow down, review, and reset.
Mm.
And we all need those. So when it comes to Mercury, planet of communication, we're slowing down our communication. We're evaluating, how am I communicating in ways that are benefiting me? How am I communicating in ways that I'm not? You don't even have to know that retrograde is happening for these energies to affect you. You don't have to know how the sun works in order to go out onto the sun and feel the heat of the sun, to feel the warmth of the sun. So, all of these things are in place to help us to move forward. So, even in those moments where we feel like, oh, it's going backwards, or we feel like our life is going backwards, or we're dealing with the same sadness or the same irritation or the same difficulties that we've previously dealt with, that we thought we were over with, those are all opportunities for us to release at a deeper level, and to then, once we have that opportunity to release, and once we go through that process of releasing, then we're moving forward in an even higher frequency and even higher path than we were before. I think we've talked about this before, that spiral effect of growth.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure we have. Yeah, I think that is always a part of this evolution. As you were talking, I was thinking about, like, with the Mercury retrograde and Mars. I forgot Mars is in retrograde, so that makes sense now why some things are happening for me. But I remember about probably, which is this is interesting. Started noticing this before I had my spiritual awakening, or maybe I'd had it and I didn't know, but I started to, for some reason, pay attention to my sleep cycle, and how there would be certain times where I could not sleep. It was like my energy was like out the roof. Like I could sleep for 2 hours and still make it all day long. And I was like, what is, like, why does this happen? And something took my awareness to the moon. And so I started paying attention to the moon phases. And I started recognizing every time we were about to have a full moon, sometimes it depended on the sign it was going to be in, but about 5 days, a week, or 3 days before the full moon would happen, I would start getting this extreme energy in my body where I couldn't sleep. And it was like, go, 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 go. And I used to fight against it because it was frustrating for me not to sleep. Of course, we all want to have our sleep at night so we can function during the day, but I was never not functioning. I was always still getting everything done and with more energy than had I slept. And so I had this idea of, why don't I work with this instead of against it? And so anytime that I started feeling my body not wanting to sleep, I'd be like, oh, I bet there's a full moon coming this week or next week. And so I'd look at this full moon chart. And sure enough, in 4 days, there's a full moon, or 3 days. I'm like, okay, so this period of time, I'm going to feel like this. So what do I do with it? Do I fight it or do I work with it? And so I started working with it. And if I woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning, I said, okay, universe, I'm awake. I'm not going to fight this. I'm going to just go with it. And when I started flowing with the energy instead of fighting the energy, it was like that pattern of resistance started to release in my life. And I started to flow with things easier. And I started to recognize that I was doing that in all of the areas of my life, where if something was coming up in my life that was trying to, like, I thought it was going to hinder me or cause me, something bad, I looked at it as an opportunity of something that's coming into my awareness to show me something about myself. And instead of fighting against it, loving the experience. Because when you realize that love really is what transforms everything, even something that you may think is negative. This is another thing I'm being reminded in the channeling session. Somebody asked, how do you overcome a stubborn ego? And the wisdom keeper said, you love it. You love your ego. Because love, when something feels loved, when it's in the frequency of love, it doesn't have to act out. It doesn't have to perform. It doesn't have to convince. It doesn't have to seek out. It doesn't have to do anything to feel love because it is love. It already knows it's loved. And so, what we're doing in our lives is we're trying to come back to love. But all these things that come up around us, the emotions, the experiences, the problems, all that stuff that comes up, they're all, like what you said, they're all here for my highest good. But if I'm pushing back against it, it can't work for me. So if I switch my energy and my mindset and I keep my vibration high instead of lowering it back in, like closing that door again and going back into the dark, I can see it differently. First of all, because there's light on it, and I can send love to it. And that experience actually helps me grow and expand and use that for something good, when maybe it would have been bad had I not. And that's like,
Mhm.
as we're continuing to shift and awaken, we're always coming back to, do I let this energy like control me and push me and cause resistance? Or do I flow with it and I allow it to teach me and send love towards it? Because
I
it's the
love that
love
so
that's
much.
transforming it. The love is what, not, I hate saying we're clearing things out, because they're not being cleared out. They're being conform, like they're transforming.
Yeah. 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 Energy's never lost, right? It's
Right.
just how are we using that energy? Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I was oh, so many things that you said just sparked so many thoughts. First of all, we're less than a week from a full moon right now, just
Mhm.
FYI. And but also the moon cycle um it affects everybody, but women especially are affected by the moon cycle. So it's an important aspect to consider. And also, the other thing that I was thinking was how important the questions are that we're asking ourselves. So in the past, I was always asking, what's wrong with me? And of course, when I ask the question, what's wrong with me? My brain, which is a tool, It's not the end, it's not who I am, but it's a tool, would then go into the database and give me everything that was wrong with me
Yep.
instead of asking the question, okay, how could this be for my benefit? This is what I heard and what you were saying is like you started to ask, how could this be to my benefit that this is happening? I'm noticing this pattern. How could this be to my benefit? How can I use this for good instead of resisting it? So just changing the question changes the quality of the answers that we receive. So if we're always in that state of condemning ourselves or looking for what's wrong with us, I had this really fascinating, I don't know if I can't remember if we've talked about this before, but I just want to share this briefly. I had this fascinating conversation with this man on a plane flight. Typically when I get on a plane flight, like I open my book and I start reading. But as soon as I sat down, he engaged me in conversation and we talked for, I think our flight was like 3 hours. We talked the whole 3 hours. And it was so fascinating. He was such an interesting man. He had gone through some huge, huge challenges in his life and had become a drug addict and then had discovered Christianity, and he had been able to break the cycle of his addiction and build a beautiful life with his wife and kids. And but what was so interesting, because I'm a student of the Bible, he was a student of the Bible, and what was so fascinating about the conversation, and I just loved this man, and I could see the evolution of humanity in his story. Like he hit rock bottom and then he found light. He found light in Jesus and he found light in those stories and he brought himself out of that darkness. And yet he was in this place um of seeing Jesus as a divider or a person who was all about the rules. And that's
Mm.
okay. That's where he was at. It was totally okay. But it was so funny because our conversation, I would kind of bring it back to love, and the expression of love that Jesus was bringing, that Christ consciousness, and then he would kind of go back to kind of it was almost like this back and forth of, but what about the rules? And I'm like, but what about love? But what about the
Yeah.
rules? But what about love? And what was so wonderful, because I'm old now, guys, like I've got grandkids and all this stuff. And he was a younger man. And I could just see, I was like, I remember being at his stage in life and being in that cycle of, but what about the rules? And I was so grateful that somehow I have found light in those stories and I've found the love that was the message in those stories. But we all travel through, just like you talked about, we all travel through those lower contracted emotions and states of being. And then we have an opportunity to continue to open that door, letting in more and more light and continue to move from contracted energy to expanded energy. But that was fascinating. We had such a beautiful conversation. I just loved my conversation with him. I wish I had a recording of it. He was a really remarkable man, but it was interesting. We kept going back and forth on all these different stories.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a like what a testament to the evolution of our consciousness. Because, you and I both spent time in religion, different sects of it. Like, you were one end and I was the other. But in my process, like being a part of the Pentecostal evangelical non-denominational, all wrapped into one kind of church, it was all about hell and brimstone, and if you do this, then you're going to hell and you don't really know God if you do this and all that stuff. And I was terrified all the time. Oh my God, I'm going to do something wrong. Like I remember thinking, I can't listen to that music because it's not Christian. I can't do that. I can't shop at that store because it's not Christian. I can't do, all these different things full of fear. And when I went through my transformation and had my awakening and started to suddenly see the world differently, that fear was in me so strongly, like all these rules. I'm breaking the rules. The rules are what I have to follow to get to this place of enlightenment, to get to Jesus, to get to God. And over time, as I started to really dissect the rules, inside the rules is the love. And it's not about the rule. It's not about what you do. It's not about what you engage. It's about the energy in which you do it. And is
Mm-hmm.
it being done in love? Is it being done in spite or anger or shame or hate or fear? Like, what energy are you acting in? And that's what's going to be manifested back to you in your experience based on how you engage with that. But I know, oh my gosh, it was scary for me to start to shift in that energy of awakening to release the fear of it has to be a certain way for me to be okay, and feeling safe in another place where I didn't feel like I had to follow the rules to be a good spiritual God-fearing woman or whatever you wanted to call it, like that I already was that. And just like you were talking about, like the sun is just a sun. Like when you finally come to this understanding that it doesn't take anything. I mean, I'm more aware now of what I engage in than I probably was then, but it's because I'm not doing it in fear. Like I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
watch a horror movie because I know how it makes me feel. Back
Yeah.
then it was because I was inviting demons in my life. But
Yeah.
my vibration, it clashes with my vibration at this point. It's not because I'm fearful of something, it's because that would require me having to shift into a different consciousness. And once you come into a place, like going back into it, it's like trying to squeeze yourself back into your baby clothes when you're an adult. And
Mm.
it's not like you're just not going to fit anymore.
Yeah.
So you outgrow things.
Yeah, it's doing things. Are we doing things because of fear, which is, honestly, you're talking about that black sheep. Honestly, in these studies and these things that I've read, like 85% of the population is doing things from a place of fear. They fear, like you're talking about all the rules, right? We follow the letter of the law in order to be okay, because we're fearful if we don't, something bad is going to happen, versus I'm choosing to move forward in this way because I love myself and I love the people around me, and I have this connection with God, universe, source, that gives me the information, the spirit that I need to make the correct choice for me
Right.
and for my family and for my friends and for my experiences. And so it's like, what are we doing it from? Are we doing it from a place of fear, or are we doing it from a place of love? When I was raising my kids, I remember having these discussions with myself. Am I, because when you have little kids and they act up in public, and then you're embarrassed because your kid is acting like a maniac, you sometimes you can tend to, and I would say most of the time, you can tend to react based on what will everybody else think. From a place of fear, everybody will think that I'm a bad mom or I'm a bad person, versus what would I do in love? What is the best action for love in this moment. And those are sometimes they look the same, but it feels different.
Yeah.
And we respond differently. So it can kind of sometimes look similar, but it feels very different. So when we're responding with love, it's not that necessarily we allow the child to act like a maniac, but
Mhm.
out of love for them, we are in a space of love and teaching versus fear, which is like, I can't allow you to act that way. And then that brings up all this other, maybe anger and different things. So it's everything that we're doing and kind of looking at it and going, okay, am I responding with love or am I responding with fear? Because really that is the choice. Also, I wanted to so recently, and I'm going to have her on my podcast sometime probably next year. But I was in a small group setting with this woman who had had a near death experience, and she had some. And every near death experience has some similarities. Um, One of the similarities is when they reach that place where they're in that space of source of God, just that overwhelming love and acceptance that they feel. But she had a unique experience where she learned about the placement of souls in different families and different communities and how that has changed over the decades and the centuries even. And how in it used to be that those souls that were more advanced, and we're not talking better than or worse than, it's not like that, it's just some have more experience than others. Just like a kindergartner you wouldn't put in college, and a college student you wouldn't put them back in kindergarten. It's more like that. It's not better or worse, it's just more experience.
Right.
And so what she shared with us is that, and you can read her book, it's called Every Breath is Precious by Leslie Lupo. What she shared with us in this, when we were meeting, was this idea that when, back in the mid 1800s, the placement of souls that were more advanced kind of changed. It was that they were, those that were more advanced would be in one community, and those that were less advanced would be in another community. And you can see this in history where some populations are like fight, 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 war, war, war all the time. And we still see that.
Yeah.
But what in the mid 1800s, it started to shift and they started to place those that were more advanced in homes where there was less advancement, where there was maybe abuse and there were challenges. And it was in order to start to enlighten the population and to create more of an enlightened population. It was really interesting. And and this idea, because I think, I mean, you've seen this in your life, I've seen this in my life, of being a chain breaker. We're familiar with that idea of being a chain breaker. I think most people are familiar with that. And we can see patterns in our families that have been broken by the choices that have been made in my generation versus previous generations. So that was just really fascinating. So if you're one of those people, kind of like, I'm kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, but if you're one of those people that like, what am I doing in this family? How did I get here? What is going on? Like, what do I do here? Just recognize that there's a reason that you are where you are, and that there's a reason that you're attracted to conversations like this, because you are discovering your own light, and you're discovering your own abilities, and you're being that's being drawn from you by what your soul plan was before you came.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people can panic when they find out that they're that person. It's a big task, it feels like sometimes. Like our ego is like, oh my God, like I'm taking on all this karmic energy and clearing it out. Oh, but the thing is just like the sun doesn't try to shine, we don't, there's like literally by us just healing ourselves and just sitting in meditation every day and just loving ourselves and sending love out, whether it's in close contact or not. Some of us have to have separation from people that hurt us in order to heal.
Hmm.
But you're still making a difference. You're still healing. You're still sending light out. Like I always think about the two ends of a battery. Like there's always going to be a negative and a positive end of a battery. That's what brings the contrast of energy. And you're maybe one of the ends and the other side is the other one. And you're still working. That energy still is there, even when you're not trying.
Yeah.
So if anybody thinks, oh God, I have to go do all this and, you know, be in contact with this abuser or whatever. No, you don't. It means that you're healing yourself, which, as Julie said, when you open that door of light, it has to transform the other energy, whether you see it in this lifetime or not.
Yeah.
It will transform it.
Well, and even on a path of, we want these things, and we want to be more in our love space more often. We want to feel peace more often. We want to experience these expanded states more frequently. Sometimes we can get into a space where we're creating all these rules, and I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't, and rather than being fearful of your path forward, bringing light to that and going, what would serve me today? And just like recently, I had been listening to a lot of content, and it was content that was important to me in that moment, but over time I started to realize this content is bringing me down. Like it's overall is not benefiting me. And so I made a conscious decision to interact with that less often or not at all. So there would be weeks that would go by and I wouldn't interact with it at all. And then there would be times when I was like, okay, I need to interact with that a little bit because I need greater understanding on this topic. But I'm learning that point. It's just a process of learning and development. It's not a process of, okay, now I have this rule and now I have this rule and I'm afraid and I'm scared. But I will mention one other thing, because one of the questions I asked Leslie when we were in that meeting last week is I said, how do we, as humans in this space, in this fear-based world, how do we live with more courage and less fear? Like, how can we transcend the fear? And what was interesting that she said, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, so this is my interpretation of what she said. So don't ever go back to her and said, "Well, Julie said you
Yeah.
said." I am going to have an opportunity to interview her, and I will ask her some of these questions, and you can hear it straight from her. But the gist of it that I got was, we are here. This is a part of our experience. We're in body. We are supposed to feel fear. She said when she was on the other side, that fear just lifted, like it was non-existent. And when she came back into her body, the fear was there again. So even though she knows the difference and can feel the difference and has experienced the difference, that fear is still part of the existence. And fear keeps us safe in so many ways, but it's the over exaggeration of that fear that we get to just we get to play with. Like we get to, like, it's
Yeah.
we're just figuring it out. And if we can stay in compassion and curiosity, that's going to serve us really well.
Yeah. Ooh, that's so good. That's so good. As I was listening to you, what I felt my spirit team saying was, if you didn't have fear as a human, you would never have a reason to move forward.
Mm,
And just like we were talking about earlier, like releasing the resistance of something and becoming a victim is like, are you a victim of the fear in your life, or are you allowing it to transcend you? Because fear is involved. I mean, the most positive thing you could ever do in your life is going to have fear involved. When I jumped off the cliff and quit my job and started doing this full time, I was terrified. I was terrified. But the fear behind it pushed me to keep going because I knew that if I didn't do what I needed to do, stay in alignment and go move forward, that I would be somewhere I didn't want to be. So the
Yeah.
fear of going back kept pushing me forward. And
I
so,
yeah, uh we are all working with push and pull energy. And so there's the push energy is those things that we're trying to move away from, right?
mm-hmm,
So that fear of not making that change pushed you forward.
mm-hmm,
But then there's also the pull. So sometimes we are in a lot of push. I don't want to feel grief. I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to feel, lonely. I don't want to, that's a lot of push energy that's pushing us forward to choose something different to avoid those things. But we can also have pull energy, and that's our love energy, and that's our peace energy, and that's our joy energy. What are the things that light you up? That's bringing you forward. So when you make that transition from a paid job, a W-2 employee, and to, an entrepreneur on your own, you have the push energy. It's like, okay, I can't see myself continuing here. I want to do something different. But then the pull energy is, what are you creating? What's lighting you up every day? What are the things that you're doing that are just like so impactful that just, these channeling sessions that you have, these opportunities you have to work with clients and watch them transform, watch them transcend their circumstances, their everyday. Those are the things that light up your soul and bring you forward. So just always looking at that push and pull and recognizing that we don't want to be just in push energy. We want to be looking for the pull energy too that brings us forward. So so cool. I love that you brought that up.
yeah, so good. So good. Oh, what a fun conversation.
That's been
Oh,
great. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
yeah. Do you have any final messages or anything that you want to share before we end?
I don't. It's we could talk for hours and never ever, ever
Ever.
run out of things to
Yes,
talk about. So
yes.
that feels like a
So,
really great place to.
yeah,
How
two.
about you?
All right. Sounds good to me. I feel complete in this. So, well, we will be back, I'm sure, with another fun topic that will involve you in and include you in. And so, and if you see this anywhere on any of our platforms and you are like, "Ooh, I have a question or a topic I want to hear them talk about," then let us know because we're totally open to hearing and we're doing this to help, ourselves and you. So, we want to support those who are watching us and here with us as because you guys are a part of us as well. So
Perfect.
thank you,
Thanks, Angie.
Julie. Yeah.
Bye.